This video will feature an abundance of spoilers for LA Noire, so if you haven't played it and intend on playing it in the future, then I'd highly recommend you come back to this video upon completing the game and experiencing it for yourself. However, if you finished the game previously or you've no problems with spoilers, then I hope you join me as I look back on Team Bondi and Rockstar's sun and crime soaked homage to film noir. Film noir is a genre that defies definition. It's impossible to pin down, yet easy to grab when it's right before your eyes. The term film noir was originally coined by French film critic Nino Frank during the mid-1940s, when the genre first came to prominence. During the dark days of World War II and in the years following its end, a wave of cinematically unique, fresh and often profound movies made their way to the silver screen. Movie audiences seemed captivated as writers and directors sought to bring more mature and morally complex views to Hollywood. Now, the reason that the genre is so difficult to define is that there are still debates to this day as to what exactly constitutes as noir. There are multiple stylistic and thematic choices historically associated with the genre, but often aren't acknowledged as a prerequisite for a film to be considered noir. Paul Schrader, who penned both Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, argued that noir was not a genre but a moment in time. While there might be many disagreements regarding how to define film noir, there are undoubtedly particular trends running through some of the most influential and well-known movies that are associated with the genre. For example, if you were to compare and contrast classic and neo-noir movies such as Stranger on the Third Floor, Chinatown, Blade Runner, LA Confidential, Breathless and Le Samurai, then you would begin to see the pattern of classic film noir elements. Most revolve around a flawed protagonist, corruption, and the ultimate fragility and flexibility of human nature and goodness. The worlds in which the characters live in are often hopeless, bleak places that often rewards anyone brave or honourable enough to fight against the status quo with abject failure or death. Stylistically speaking, film noir leans heavily on dimly lit scenes, claustrophobic interiors, bursts of light by the way of flickering street lamps or neon signs, and of course, flashbacks or voiceover narration as a means to further or give deeper context to the story. Another commonly found feature in classic noir is that of the detective protagonist, an intelligent, cunning and honourable man lost in the swamp of liars, cheats and murderers. The classic noir detective normally has to swim against the tide of bureaucracy and greed in order to bring justice to their city or to the victims of a horrendous crime. Unfortunately, their pride and righteousness often drive them down the path of destruction and an untimely death. Quick side note, unlike the complications of defining the genre of noir itself, the prototypical noir detective can easily be considered as the definition of fucking cool. I mean, seriously, just look at this guy. It was this palpable yet elusive genre that provided the inspiration and foundation for a game that itself would buck convention in its own realm. A game that would strive to recreate the past through the newest technology available. A game that would also wind up defying expectations and definition. And ultimately a game that, for better or worse, adheres faithfully to the classic trends of film noir. LA Noire was originally released in 2011 on the PS3 and Xbox 360, and was developed by Team Bondi and published by Rockstar Games. LA Noire can be classified as a neo-noir detective action-adventure with an open-world sprinkling. It takes place in 1947 in post-war Los Angeles, as you take the role of Cole Phelps, a war veteran turned LAPD officer, as he strives to navigate the murky underbelly of LA to solve a range of cases across 5 separate police divisions: patrol, traffic, homicide, vice and arson. Throughout the course of the game, you'll primarily investigate crime scenes for clues, follow up leads and interrogate suspects. Depending on how much evidence you've gathered throughout each case, the case will slowly unveil the true story behind it. These cases also routinely involve cover-based shooting, chases and good old-fashioned fistfights. Outside of the main story cases, you're also free to enjoy a free roam mode called The Streets of LA, not to be confused with True Crime. This mode is unlocked after each crime desk is completed, aside from the patrol desk. In this mode, you're afforded the opportunity to cruise through the stupendously atmospheric city with your various police partners, and if the feeling strikes you, you can hunt down hidden golden film reels, solve random street crimes, discover faithfully recreated LA landmarks, collect hidden vehicles, find badges, and listen to the selection of timely hits on the radio. The most audacious aspect of LA Noir's development was its adoption of motion scan, which was cutting-edge technology used for 3D motion capture in the film and video game industries. Motion scan was developed by Depth Analysis, which was a Sydney-based company also founded by Team Bondi founder and LA Noir lead writer Brendan McNamara. He was a busy man. At the time of the motion scan announcement, McNamara said that traditional motion capture could never bring to life the subtle nuances of the chaotic criminal underworld of LA Noire in the same way as motion scan. The emotional performance of the actors allowed the story to unfold in a brand new way. Through this revolutionary technology, we were able to deliver audiences a truly unique and revolutionary game. The process of motion scan involved 32 high-definition cameras to capture 3D performances at up to 30 frames per second, which allowed every actor's performance to be captured in minute detail. The facial animations for the time were groundbreaking and were actually intrinsic to the experience, as a lot of your time in the game would be spent interrogating people and trying to decipher if a character is being honest or not with their responses. On the flip side, the technology also had the ability to burn money. As impressive as the technology was at the time, it was incredibly expensive. In fact, LA Noir's development and marketing budget is estimated to have cost over $50 million, making it one of the most expensive games of all time. Brief summary aside, LA Noire was ostensibly an ambitious and unique game, and as I played through it I was amazed at the attention to detail present. I remember mulling over how much work must have gone into creating such a faithful depiction of 1940s LA, on top of incorporating such a new, groundbreaking technology as a fundamental gameplay feature. However, for all the obvious successes, LA Noire's biggest crime was seemingly going against people's expectations. This was, after all, a game with Rockstar Games' logo present on the cover, and even though they only published the game, that logo comes with it a certain distinction. Rockstar are arguably the biggest name in the gaming world, and hilariously fun, deep, over-the-top open-world games are now indelibly linked with them on account of the rip-roaring success of the Grand Theft Auto franchise. And while LA Noire was an open-world game in essence, it was far from it in practice. LA Noire is a linear game transplanted onto an open-world shell. Now that's not a knock on linear games by any means, but with LA Noire you can't help but get the feeling it could have been so much more. The world in which you inhabit is absolutely stunning on a visual level, but after playing for a few hours you begin to realise that the world feels completely separate from the bubble of Cole Phelps' story. As I mentioned previously, there are numerous collectibles and landmarks to visit during free roam, but they are just there. Much like the aforementioned true crime streets of LA, the city is fast, but it's hollow. You get no sense that there's something out there to be explored or waiting to be discovered. After a while, I found myself simply fast traveling from case to case by letting my partner do the driving. Even though Rockstar were only publishing the game, I think it's fair to say that people expected a certain level of interactivity to the world upon release, given the Rockstar logo. I feel like right out the gate, this is the biggest shame in regards to LA Noire. Team Bondi took the time to painstakingly build a 1940s Los Angeles and seemed totally at a loss as to what they could fill it with. Just like the noir movies of yesteryear that LA Noire was influenced by, its world feels like one big movie set. LA Noire is more akin to classic adventure games such as Grim Fandango, not only in its most important mechanics, but also in its linear, often repetitive gameplay. Each case incorporates the following gameplay elements. You get a call about a crime, you arrive at the scene, you survey the scene for clues and evidence, you take notes that you can read and go over later, you question witnesses and engage in a push and pull conversation in which you can decide to believe what the other person is saying, doubt them, or accuse them of lying. If you decide to accuse them of lying, you must provide the correct bit of evidence to support that claim. You then have to decide a suspect to question, and hopefully you've gathered enough evidence to detain the correct perpetrator. Moreover, a lot of cases are padded with scripted sequences such as foot or car chases, bar brawl style combat, and cover shooter style gunfights. And this, or some combination of that, will be what you'll be doing throughout your time in LA Noire. Now, I understand if you break any game down like that, it's going to sound disinteresting and repetitive, but please bear with me. A huge part of the game is that you're supposed to live with your mistakes. You can't repeat quests or interrogations. I actually love that part of the game. You're meant to be considerate with your actions, and just like real life, you're not able to quickly go back on a decision. In saying that, I can also see the other side of the argument. It feels like the narrative is fighting against the gameplay, as the main narrative will continue regardless of how you perform during a case. From my personal experience with the gameplay loop was incredibly engaging for the first half of the game. The homicide desk especially brought with it many memorable cases, and I had a lot of fun with it. The interrogation system was genuinely marvellous to behold, and the motion scan technology brought a heightened sense of realism to proceedings. Trying to gauge whether or not someone was lying was surprisingly refreshing initially, and I do believe that Team Bondi deserve all the credit in the world for pushing video game technology further and showing the ambition to try something different. Furthermore, I like sniffing out every last clue around each seedy, depraved crime scene and trying to find the glue to tie the mystery together. But somewhere during the fight section of the game, it becomes increasingly difficult to ignore the repetition of each case and the game as a whole. You will be doing the same combination of the same gameplay elements I mentioned earlier until the credits roll. No more, no less. The interrogation system, while being my favourite aspect of the game, it starts to grate and feel limited. It's still impressive, but even when something is new and groundbreaking, if it's used in the same way innumerable times, it will inevitably lose its shine and wow factor. I was sincerely hoping that other dialogue options would become available as I progressed through the game, but the game held firm with providing the initial 3 base options throughout. Not only that, but Cole's reactions to your believe, lie and doubt decisions became ever more erratic and often unintentionally hilarious.
Your mom and dad are happily married?
What are you saying? Of course they are.
I think your father was violent with your mother. I think they weren't very happy, and you should tell me, young lady.
You may be the police, but you have no right to talk about my mom and dad like that.
Moreover, hunting down clues loses its appeal as they're presented and uncovered in the exact same way every time. It almost becomes a chore to get from case to case, and the City of Angels becomes a devil that you almost want to avoid. The slow, methodical pace of the gameplay, while reminiscent of classic noir movies and very much a conscious design choice, certainly did not appeal to everyone, and in my personal opinion, it was not diverse enough to carry the narrative to the finish line. The game showed its hand very quickly, and while I still do believe that LA Noire is far from a terrible game in the gameplay sense, it does wear thin after a while. The gunplay is run-of-the-mill cover shooting, combat is clunky but satisfying, and every crime scene runs smoothly, and you're never normally at a loss as what you should do or where you should go. They're all good. The drive mechanics are a nice change of pace from other games, and each car feels very heavy and powerful to control. But again, even with good driving mechanics being present, if you've no real need to drive anywhere other than to the next case, it almost becomes irrelevant as the mechanics are not being utilised in an engaging, interesting way. LA Noire's insistence on following the same formula for each case certainly weakens the overall experience. It was in this regard that the game was crying out for extra activities or fleshed out missions throughout the world as a way to break the repetition of the cases, and also as a way to perhaps to get closer to the man behind Cole Phelps. But if I were to hazard a guess, Team Bondi never wanted us to get close to the man who embodied the prototypical film noir protagonist. We were always doomed to be bystanders to his story. LA Noire's protagonist is one Cole Phelps, a decorated USMC veteran of the Pacific Campaign who returns to LA in the wake of the end of World War II. Cole returns to his family while attempting to reintegrate into normal society by becoming a patrol officer of the LAPD. And from here, I'll try to be as succinct as I possibly can with the story, so wish me luck. Cole begins his story working with his partner Officer Ralph Dunn, and Phelps immediately makes an impression by successfully solving a major murder case involving the Black Dahlia and several victims. Cole is the one to connect and link murders that were previously thought to be unconnected or copycat killings to one particular killer. This leads to Cole gaining a promotion to detective. As Cole continues his career in the police force, Cole gains respect and admiration, as well as a reputation for being the go-to man for chasing and closing challenging cases. As Cole progresses through the ranks, he eventually lands himself a promotion in the glamorous vice department. The Vice Department involves a series of cases connected by morphine. A freight ship coming back from the war was robbed. A bunch of Marines that Cole Phelps had previously served with in the war stole Army surplus morphine, Army surplus weapons, and Army surplus cigarettes. The morphine is all over the streets of LA, and Cole eventually tracks down the people who sold, distributed, and originally sold the drugs. It is also around this time that the Honourable Honest mask slips off Cole as he begins falling for German lounge singer Elsa Lichtmann. It soon comes to light that Cole has actually been having an affair with her. Meanwhile, in the shadows lurks Roy Earl, his partner in Vice, and unfortunately for Cole, he's as corrupt as they come. Earl sells his partner out and uses Cole's affair as a way to help several prominent figures in the city, including the chief of police, cover up a major scandal by making him a media scapegoat. Earl does this for one simple reason: money. Cole is used in exchange for a place in a syndicate known as the Suburban Redevelopment Fund, or SRF, a development program that supplies homes for homecoming World War II veterans. Cole's adultery is exposed to the world, and his reputation subsequently shatters as he becomes a disgraced figure in the LAPD, and this eventually leads him getting a demotion to arson. On an even more personal note, it also costs him his marriage. In Arson, Cole works alongside Jack Kelso, an insurance claims investigator who Cole first met during the war, and together they discover a huge conspiracy where a lot of influential people in LA arrange to build houses for the veterans, only to set them on fire and claim the insurance money later. As the story draws to a close, Jack Kelso and Cole Phelps chase the arsonist who kidnapped Elsa through the sewers and storm drains of LA. However, in the midst of the chaos, there is a flood, and although Kelso kills the arsonist and saves Elsa Lichtmann, Cole ultimately drowns. Cole's honor is restored in death, and he gets a hero's funeral. Depressingly, the men who sold him down that river are all present at his funeral, and they portray themselves as his friends and loyal colleagues. Phew, okay, are you still with me? I tried to be as quick as possible with that, and yet I know that that is a very glossed over version of the story. So yeah, for the most part, I greatly enjoyed the story. Most of the performances from the actors were great, even with the occasionally shitty lines of dialogue cropping up. In my opinion, the story goes through a lull period midway before picking up steam towards the end. But upon replaying the game for the first time in a few years, I feel like I've a newfound appreciation for what Team Bondi tried to achieve with LA Noire. So having said that, I'm going to cut straight into the most controversial aspect of the game's story: the affair. This was a completely jarring moment on my first playthrough of the game, as there really wasn't any prelude to it. It sort of came out of nowhere. Furthermore, it didn't affect me emotionally as I had no connection whatsoever to Cole's family. You only caught a brief glimpse of them at the start of the game, and then they're not seen or referenced again until the unveiling of Cole's infidelity. I mean, how am I meant to have an emotional attachment to a situation or characters without even having the most basic development or relationship to them? Furthermore, apart from the scenes in the bar together, Elsa and Cole are not showing to have any other interactions outside of that bar. It can easily be interpreted as Team Bondi deliberately leaving out plot points building up to the affair reveal in order to have a cheap, easy twist present in the story. Upon finishing that first playthrough, I found myself asking that question, and quite a few more. I mean, the death of Cole, was it necessary? Was the corrupt organization selling homes to World War II veterans a bit too ridiculous? In the years following that first playthrough, and with a few more playthroughs under my belt, a lot of these questions have fallen by the wayside. In my opinion, I feel like I only now get what LA Noire is to me and why its story left me feeling empty and unfulfilled. It was never my story. It was never going to have a happy ending, and I was never in control, no matter how much the gameplay led me to believe that I was. I had expectations that it wasn't even trying to meet. It was noir through and through. I just didn't realize it. Although LA Noire is a video game, it isn't really structured like one, it seems. It is less about the player-initiated action as it is about the action within the story. The gameplay elements do not forward the game or the narrative. It's already structured and laid out, and the story takes precedent. As I stated at the start of the video, for better or worse, LA Noire adheres faithfully to film noir elements such as a complex, flawed protagonist, corruption, and the ultimate fragility of human nature and goodness. The story was always going to unfold this way. It hits all of the noir beats. We don't truly step into the role of Cole Phelps. He's using us as a vessel to tell his story. As I said, everything is set in stone. He is a fully formed character and the player has no role in his development. We just have to handle the fallout from his shitty decisions. That's why I feel like the gameplay was fighting against the narrative. The gameplay gave you the feeling that you were controlling the ultimate outcome, but it was only an illusion of freedom and choice. Looking through this noir lens, let me give you my ultimate opinion on the affair and the narrative on a whole. There is much more to Cole's actions than at first thought, and during the first playthrough. And over time and reflection, Cole's once random and unexplainable infidelity makes nothing but perfect sense to me. Cole starts the game as a man with a guilty conscience about his actions during the war. He harbours ambitions of joining the police force as a means of redemption, a way to pay for the sins of his past. On the other hand, his home life can also be described as the living embodiment of the American dream, right down to that beautiful little white picket fence. His wife is pretty and dutiful, but also slightly naive and unfettered by the difficulties of the world. Cole himself, in spite of his experiences during the war, is also a tad naive and headstrong with the notion of being able to be a force for good and change in Los Angeles, and he holds firm in the belief that justice will prevail. Rather poetically, as Cole gets deeper into the underbelly of Los Angeles, it's the city that eventually changes him. We never get to see Cole's family because he doesn't get to see them himself. He's completely being sucked down the drain of sleaze and corruption that his family have all but disappeared from view. Cole's wife has no understanding of the world that Cole now finds himself trapped in, whereas Elsa is the antithesis of Marie. Elsa lives in this world and has been shaped by it, and due to that, she's the only person that Cole can turn to for support, and is the sole person that can truly grasp the hardships that Cole is going through. On account of this, Cole drifts away from his family to the point that they don't exist anymore. It can be argued that the game made a choice to refrain showing his wife as a way to visually show the divide that is growing between them. His wife could never understand or empathize with the world of corruption, bribery, sleaze and depravity, even if he did confide in her his troubles. They are no longer compatible as a couple, as Cole is no longer the man he was at the start of the game. Elsa represents the personification of the change within Cole, and that he is no longer able to relate or be with his wife, as she represents the surface world that isn't aware of the undercurrent of Los Angeles that Cole's now swimming through. It isn't a relationship or an affair based on sex. It's built on support, two fundamentally damaged, fucked up people brought together by their shared hell in the City of Angels. And I believe that the presence of a sexual relationship hides that fact, as it could be considered unnecessary to the story, but it also serves as a reminder that Cole is not the infallible war hero he perceives himself to be, or that others perceive him to be. He is as vulnerable to corruption as anyone, regardless of his status as a crusader for good in a dirty, dirty city. And at this point of the game, it becomes glaringly obvious that you cannot protect Cole from the inevitable. He's making his own decisions and he's digging his own grave, reinforcing the idea of powerlessness against corruption that pervades the story. It also becomes evident that Cole will never get the redemption he craves. Throughout the story, Cole hates to be reminded and lauded for being a war hero because he doesn't feel like he is. He tells Roy Earl, "I can assure you, I'm no war hero." His quest for atonement is highlighted by Garrett Mason, a murderer and a psychopath of all people. Cole's quest for atonement comes up while Cole is interrogating Mason, and he is openly asked, why did he join the police force despite being overqualified? Do I get a sense you're looking for personal redemption? As I said, Mason is an out-and-out psychopath, yet he is far from stupid, and he's quickly able to identify this side of Cole very quickly, proving himself to be the only character able to pinpoint Cole's motivations at all, perhaps even articulating them better and being more aware of them than Cole himself. And even though he gets a hero's funeral, Cole does not get his redemption. He dies for his past mistakes in an undercurrent that symbolizes his past catching up to him. Every mistake Cole made led him to this moment, from ordering Ira Hogenboom to burn out the cave that was filled with civilians during the war, right up to allowing his environment to change him internally and give in to temptation. There's so much foreshadowing present in the game that I could talk about it for ages, and after replaying the game I realised just how much of it is used to startlingly good effect. There's a classic noir vibe continuously present, a tragic inevitability to the events surrounding Cole Phelps. He's not a bad man by any means, but he's deeply flawed, and despite all of his heroics, there appears to be no true justice. Cole Phelps could never escape his past or atone for his mistakes. They were always going to ultimately cost him his life. LA Noire succeeds exponentially in this area. It paints a very dismal picture of Los Angeles and the human condition, where the men of integrity are not able to change anything, and the corrupt men continue on unhindered. It's a classic noir tale, and one that I've only come to truly appreciate as I've gotten older. I think that the years have been kind to LA Noire, as it can now stand on its own feet as what it is, not what it should have been at the time of its release. It bucked convention by following the example of film noir to a T. It remains a prime example of ambition and willingness to push the boundaries of the industry, coming at a great personal and financial cost, but also what can be achieved when money is given to people striving to break new ground. Without games like LA Noire and developers standing firm in their desire to mold something new and push the envelope, the medium would forever stagnate creatively. LA Noire is not without its problems. The repetitive nature of the gameplay has certainly not gotten better with time, and it often feels like it's interrupting the story, but it is certainly still playable today. However, in the years since its release, I feel like those issues have become less and less important in the grand scheme of things. It was never going to be that 1940s style Grand Theft Auto. It was so much more than that. The enduring legacy of LA Noire will be its tale of Cole Phelps, and in his quest of combating corruption and seeking redemption in the City of Angels, it eventually exposes fallibility and the delicate nature of humanity. Thank you for watching.